All right, the topic is, why do I fall out of my PEEP when shooting longer distances? And this is such an awesome question because the further you have to move this sight down to get longer yardages, the more awkward it kind of feels if your comfort is set in a completely different position. So right now I'm, sitting here at 75 yards, but obviously if my sight's all the way up here for 20, and that's where I've initially set my PEEP sight at for my anchor and feeling good, all that stuff, and I've set it when my sight was this high and now I've brought it this low, you're certainly gonna feel some variation, you're gonna feel some difference. So there's two parts to this equation. The first is certainly to learn to set your PEEP height to where you're comfortable at the average distance that you're going to be shooting. So in other words, if you're shooting indoors and you're shooting your Vegas stuff or your 5-spot stuff, or if whenever you're at home you're always shooting at 30 to 40 yards max, and that's where you've set your PEEP to where you feel super comfortable, then of course, once you start to get past 60, 70, 80 and try to make those 100-yard shots at a Total Archery Challenge events, you're gonna feel like you're just floating out here. And you're gonna feel like as you're looking through that PEEP, you slowly start to come out and the front sight, rear sight starts to change and you start to fall out of it. So what you need to do, and something that I learned when I started to shoot in the FIDA events back in the day, which was a 90-meter max or a 99-yard max, is I had to start setting my PEEP to be most comfortable in my anchor position when I had that sight down at that 70-yard range. So in other words, I would go here and I would get to this distance and I would set my sight, but if I felt like I was kind of floating, I would kind of move that PEEP a little bit. And so what I figured out was if my PEEP is a little bit lower when I'm gonna be shooting longer shots or above average shots, if my PEEP is a little bit lower to begin with, and you will have to resight your scale, if you move your PEEP, you're gonna have to move your scale. However, your anchor is still gonna feel more comfortable there, and you're gonna be able to not have the front sight, rear sight start to fade away on you. So I always set mine for those types of shoots to where I was most comfortable at 70 meters. And the reason why is because even though we shot 90 meters as the max, 30 meters as a short, 70 meters is where all the medals were done. The medal matches were at 70 meters. So that's where I really needed to be at my best. I set them there. And at 90, I felt like I was floating a little bit, but I would relax my jaw so that that little variation would allow my anchor to be a little lower and I wouldn't feel like I was floating down here to try to look down through that sight. Now the other thing is once you go to a close distance, you're probably gonna have to feel like you're smashing down a little bit more on the string so that you can look up through that PEEP sight to the higher end of your scale where your sight's gonna be set. So if you're perfectly comfortable at 70, you're gonna be a little smashed in at 30, but then you're gonna be barely floating when you get to 90. So that's one of them, is setting your PEEP at the position to where you're most comfortable for the average yardage that you're wanting. So if you know you're going to the tack and you and all the boys always step back to 70 plus yards, then if you've got that PEEP all zeroed in for down in your basement, then yeah, when you roll that sight all the way down to the bottom of that scale, you're gonna feel like you're floating. So get out and get that PEEP adjusted slightly. You're probably gonna have to move it down a little bit compared to your close distances. Okay, now that's number one. And I'm gonna set my sight now before I forget it and put one in the dirt for you. The next thing for falling out of your PEEP is the direction of this pull. So this is the second part of the equation. When you're at full draw, this rear arm should be parallel to the front. Now, some people, because they're floating and they're trying to anchor a little bit lower and try to look down through for that scope being so low, what happens is I see those elbows start to tip down just like this a little bit. And so if that elbow's tip down and you're trying to pull through your shot, then you're pulling that triangle down and away. So you're pulling on it and you're pulling it down and away, so you're falling out of it because you're actually pulling it out. So consciously telling yourself to get that elbow up, and it'll almost feel like it's too high, but I promise you, if you look back at a picture, it's not. It needs to be parallel to the front. So when I'm at a longer shot like this, I want to stand proud, and when I draw back, I keep that arm parallel and I bring that elbow up, and I almost focus and emphasize getting it up more than I like, and by the time I'm settled in, it's actually where it needs to be. If you look back through any video of me coaching other archers, if you ever see me get that arrow out or my finger and I start touching the tip of that elbow back there, I'm trying to get it up so that they're not gonna pull and fade out of their PEEP sight for that longer distance. Focus on those elements of the long shots, and the long shots will get easier.